Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pestana. And we're here today with special guest, Dr. Jude Currivan, who's here to share with us her new book, The Story of Gaia, The Big Breath and the Evolutionary Journey of Our Conscious Planet. Now, many of you know Dr. Jude Currivan. She's a cosmologist, futurist, planetary healer, and previously one of the most senior business women in the UK. She has a master's degree in physics from Oxford University and a doctorate in archaeology. She has traveled extensively, worked with wisdom keepers from many traditions, and is a strong, lifelong researcher of the nature of reality. She has authored 6 books, including The Cosmic Hologram, and is a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Jude Currivan.
Marianne, thank you. It's wonderful to be with you.
What an honor it is to have you here and to be able to talk about this book. I was so impressed with this. What inspired you to write it?
Gaia. Literally.
Well, enough said then.
Enough said. Yes, on to the next. Well, there's slightly longer journey than that insofar that about 20 years ago, I was guided that at some point I would write a trilogy, and I wasn't even an author then. And then I have written earlier books, but it was guided that I would write a trilogy that was about our potential for transformation, our potential for conscious evolution. And so the first book of that trilogy came out in 2017, which was The Cosmic Hologram. And the second book is The Story of Gaia. And there's a third book I hope to come. But 20 years ago, I was given the titles. I was told the first book should be about this, and the second book. So I was sort of given my marching orders, as it were, quite a while ago. But it took until now, really, for the evidence that's the foundation for both the Cosmic Hologram and the Story of Gaia to be discovered, to be, able to be shared, to show a very, very different perspective of our universe, our planetary home, and us.
I know we keep learning so much, and we're in such a great time that all this great information is coming together. Was there anything when you were doing your research, because I'm sure that, you do research all the time, was there anything that has really kind of surprised you on your path?
For the Story of Gaia, it just deepened my relationship with Gaia. And I do feel the book wrote me, because it's a big story. I mean, it's a story of our entire universe, 13.8 billion year journey. And I could have got lost in it. It would have been very easy if I felt that it was mine to impose my perspective of Gaia's story. But I didn't feel that. I showed up, and I hope I got out of the way. And I hope I therefore allowed Gaia's story to flow through me, and it did. And if I was in reverence and awe and love for our planetary home before I started, that deepened radically as I went through, because I realized just what an incredible story our whole universe soul's journey has been. And it's a story that, it's thrilling, it's marvelous, it's wondrous. It's deeply loving, and it's deeply, deeply meaningful and purposeful, because it's showing us that, the evidence is showing us that our universe exists and evolves as a unified entity. It shows our universe, the evidence is showing that mind and consciousness aren't something we have. They're literally what we and the whole world are. And it shows that our universe meaningfully exists and purposefully evolves from simplicity to complexity. So it's also the story of us and our innate meaning and purpose within a living universe and an evolving, living planetary home.
When most people think of the universe, they tend not to think of it as a conscious, sentient being in many ways. How is it that we are looking at this with that element of consciousness?
When you go further back, people did. I mean, I'm a great student of ancient wisdom teachings and indigenous wisdom teachings and spiritual revelatory insights. And virtually all of them speak to a living universe. When we go far back, we don't tend to see the record as suggesting it is necessarily evolving, because, you know, the concept of an evolutionary universe seems to be relatively more recent, of course, Darwin and beyond. But when we go back, whether it's ancient India, ancient China, ancient Egypt, whether we go back to, you know, the indigenous wisdom teachings, they all speak to, they all invite us to not just understand that we are microcosms of a living universe, but that therefore we have meaning and purpose, and that essentially we are inseparable from its unity. And it's not about unity in uniformity as uniformity. It's unity in radical, wondrous, complex diversity. And, you know, we've lost, in a way, and I'm not blaming and shaming any of the journey we've taken, but the journey that science has taken us on for the last 300 years has been a journey that sought to understand how the appearance of our universe is. And to some degree, in fact, I would say to a significant degree, what has been overlooked is that its appearance, as we now have the evidence for, its appearance of energy and matter and space-time are not its fundamental reality, but they emerge, that appearance emerges from deeper levels of causation. So we're really returning now to ancient, indigenous, universal wisdom teachings with leading edge science, integrating into a unitive, unified underpinning and framing, and a remembering of who we really are as a result.
Do you feel this time in history is what really is prompting a lot of the discussion on consciousness because people are looking to make that inward dive?
I think, yeah, very much so. I mean, the situation is our worldview, our mindsets, our collective worldview and mindsets drive our behaviors. So if we've been taught, and we have, if our social structures embody, as they do, a worldview of materialism and separation, then that's how we behave. And that inevitably means that, you know, we've come to a place where our behaviors from such a perception of separation have become unsustainable, because separation, you know, invites us, as it were, drives us, as it were, essentially into a world of suffering, of inequality, of conflicts. And it is not, as we now understand, and we have the evidence now, that I share, but what I share is based on the evidence of discoveries from thousands upon thousands of leading edge scientists across all scales of existence and many fields of research, that this fundamental, our fundamental reality, the fundamental reality of our entire universe is intelligent, is living, is in itself innately conscious. And I think that then invites us to a remembering of who we are and a homecoming into our innate wholeness.
In your book, you go through the different stages of the planetary evolution and consciousness in many ways, and you start with the big breath. Can you share a little bit about that with our listeners?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Well, were you taught at school that our universe began as a big bang? Because I certainly was. And I think everybody that I'm aware of, we were taught that our universe began as a big bang. And, you know, it wasn't big and it wasn't a bang. You know, I'm being facetious about the big because we've known as cosmologists that our universe began in a very, very tiny state. And ever since then, space has expanded as time has flowed forward. But the point was, the word bang certainly conjures up for me, and I suspect for you and our listeners, so chaos, an explosion. And that was not the way our universe began. It began in an incredibly ordered state, marvelously fine-tuned, and with its innately relational. So the laws of physics basically, you know, are the instructions for how to for how our universe not only exists as a unified entity, but how it can evolve as a unified entity from simplicity to complexity. So instead of a big bang with all that sort of chaotic perception, I describe that first moment of our universe, of space-time, of energy matter, 13.8 billion years ago, as the first moment of an ongoing big breath. And of course, the ancient Indian sages talk about our universe as being the outbreath of God, the outbreath of Brahman. So leading edge science is discovering that ancient wisdom to be truly the case.
And how would Darwinism fit into all of this as well?
Darwinism fits beautifully. You can't see, but behind me on my shelf, looking over my shoulder, is a bust of Charles Darwin. And we actually launched the Story of Gaia in Oxford, in England, at the museum where in 1860 was the very first debate on Darwinian evolution. It was called the Great Debate, and it was a lot of sort of folks who absolutely hated the idea of evolution, and other folks who were really wanting to go with the evidence of what Darwin was discovering. And the point of Darwin as a great visionary as well as a great scientist is he didn't jump to conclusions. He was a marvelous observer. And so he went as far as his observations could take him at that time, but no further. So he understood variability in biological organisms. He saw how biological organisms adapted themselves to their environment through that variability and through that sort of inheritance. But since that time, since that 1860 debate, which was right just after his book had been on the origin of species had been published, we've gone so much further. But part of the issue is that the folks, the scientists who followed him, decided, saw evolution as driven by random processes. When the DNA and RNA and the understanding genetics came along, there was still this view, not held by Darwin, as far as I can have any sense or knowledge of, but they inserted this idea of randomness into the whole journey of evolution. And we now know, as I write about in the Story of Gaia, that evolution is not driven by random mutations and occurrences. Instead, it's intelligently and informationally guided from simplicity to complexity. And I go into a lot of detail about this because when we see the evidence that this is the case, we can then really begin to sort of dive deeper into this innate purposefulness of our evolving universe and how that innate, informationally informed intelligence guides the ongoing evolutionary arc from simplicity to complexity. And instead of just a linear evolutionary process, we're now finding that there's a massive amount of what's called horizontal gene transference at times of catastrophic change, where instead of a slow evolutionary processes, there may be a breakdown, a catastrophic breakdown in some cases, of the existing biosphere. But from that breakdown comes an extraordinary and rapid and radical revisioning of what biological evolution can be, and a whole new arc of potential and possibility opens up. So we're seeing now processes that Darwin had no knowledge of. He couldn't have. And I actually feel that if he were with us now, he would be whooping, jumping up and down and whooping with joy.
No doubt, because we've come such a long way.
We have. And yet, and on that way, there's been a view, as I say, that, biological evolution is driven by random occurrences and mutations. And we now know, and we have the evidence that really just is not the case.
So what is some of the evidence that says that? Because I think a lot of people, when they think of Darwin, they think of that randomness, and It seems to be such a misnomer.
It is. I think it does him a great disservice. It really does. He talked about variability, adaptability, but he did not, because his evidence, his observance was not showing it was random. So he didn't jump to a conclusion. That's really a mindset that finds it very challenging to actually, perceive an underpinning of the appearance of our universe as being innately mindful and conscious. And yet cosmologists are realizing that the appearance of our universe arises from something deeper. So, the clues we've had for 100 years with quantum physics and relativity are now delving deeper and seeing this emergence. And certainly the evidence we have for biological evolution, and in fact, the entire evolutionary arc of our universe is showing the same thing. So one example, the DNA in every cell of our body, 37 trillion cells, essentially, of our bodies, is incredibly complex of itself. But when at cellular levels are always dynamic, cellular processes are dynamic, they respond both on inner and outer levels to the environment, to what the rest of their body is telling them, because our bodies are dynamic informational superhighways that are always in conversation and call and response and many other processes to retain the coherence of our bodies, our physical bodies, through a whole lifetime. So every moment, essentially, milliseconds, there are signals, informational signals, where the DNA in our cells is basically consulted. And instead of being the sort of the manager of the cell, it's more a sort of a library of possibility that in the main will be fairly constant, but can, of course, change rapidly and express its genes in many different ways. But when that happens, each time a sort of process, a reaction, a response happens, there's an error rate of something like 1 in 10,000. Now, if random processes drove evolution, those 1 in 10,000 random, if you like, errors would just be allowed to continue, because the principle of our universe is as simple as it can be, but no simpler, and it uses the least energy to enable its evolutionary progress. So if you have an error rate of 1 in 10,000, that would likely drive evolution. But what the cell does is something extraordinary. It corrects those errors through a whole process of informational transfer. So the error rate between taking some instructions to build a protein and building the protein, the error rate is reduced from about 1 in 10,000 to 1 in a billion. So the cells of our body, every moment throughout our lives, are really taking down any errors that occur to an absolutely bare minimum, because we find that randomness does not drive evolution. It drives dead ends in evolution. Instead, an organism is in constant informational communication within itself and with its environment. So these are collaborative and co-evolutionary processes that not only have continued for 4 billion years through Gaia's story as a planetary home, but for the entire 13.8 billion years of our universe's entire story.
So as we talk about the age of Gaia, I know you go through, teenager and adolescence and what have you in the book. Where are we now?
Well, I think a dear friend of mine, Dwayne Elgin, as his audiences when he gives talks, collected, where do you think we are as a human species at the moment? And most people say teenagers, awkward, difficult teenagers. And that, I feel, is where we have been. We have been adolescents. But I also feel now we are, hopefully, as Ken Wilber speaks to, we're waking up. And as when we wake up, we can begin to grow up. We need to clean up, because a lot of our collective trauma is through this misperception of our being separate from each other, our planetary home, our entire universe. So we're waking up, we're growing up, we're hopefully now begin to clean up, and then we can show up as adults. So for me, this is a moment, this is our collective, literal, existential moment of choice. Do we stay where we've been, living in the illusion of separation, or now with the evidence that we are inseparable, while unity is not uniformity, but radical diversity? Do we wake up to remember that, and therefore to come together and to consciously evolve and become, as I believe Gaia is inviting us to be, as I believe our entire universe is inviting us to be, co-evolutionary partners in the next great, potentially marvelous adventure of conscious evolution?
For people that feel that maybe, I think a lot of people may feel a little helpless when it comes to the state of our planet and just how resources are being used and animals are going extinct and what have you. If we get to this place where we're actually working on our own consciousness, and definitely in group setting, the collective consciousness, will that make effect on any of the things that are happening within the planet?
I think it already is, Marianne. I think it already is. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. The more, as I say, we're so much more. We think we're a human being. Yes, we are. Of course, we're human beings. But we're also spiritual beings having a human experience. We're also microcosmic co-creators of our universe's evolutionary impulse. Whether, hitherto we've been aware of that or not, we are. So as more and more of us are literally, in whatever way, we're finding ourselves invited into this inner waking, which then is the inner being of that in the outer doing of that. And as we come together, absolutely, more and more of us are linking up and lifting up. And when we do that from this unitive awareness, that is the transformational impulse, evolutionary impulse, experienced and embodied within us.
I know you've done some great research and taken some amazing trips. I'd love for you to share how your trip to Ethiopia impacted not just you, but your research as well.
Thank you. It was quite a while ago now, but I remember it very vividly because I write about in a book called Hope, Healing Our People and Earth, about that trip, because obviously, our journey, our human journey began in Africa. Some of the oldest examples we have of our hominin ancestral lineage are from Ethiopia. And a group of us just felt a call to be there in that place and really attune to what was happening then, many millions of years ago. And I wrote about my sense of that at the time because a new hominin had just been discovered, some fragmented bones called Ardipithecus ramada, and Ardi for short, because Ardipithecus ramada is quite a mouthful. So the remains of Ardi had just been found. And we now know that Ardi originated probably 6.5 million years ago. And that was one of the key sort of points of divergence between the great apes and what became us, modern humans. And I write in the Story of Gaia about later research on Ardi that shows that that species really began the long journey down from the great forests of Africa to what was becoming the savannah, down to the ground, and then began to walk upright. And obviously then that long journey to us. But the key thing that I discovered when I was doing the research for the Story of Gaia that I hadn't realized when I was in Ethiopia those years ago, was that for the first time, the male and the female of the Ardi species were the same size. They had the same dentition. Now that may seem pretty trivial, but if you think about it, it's fundamental, because in the great apes, gorillas, for example, chimpanzees, the males are much bigger than the females, much bigger teeth. Those are much more dominant. But in Ardi, the males and the females, it seems, being the same size, were able to pair bond for the first time in that long journey to that point, and the long journey from then to us. So I write in the book that I feel that Ardi was built for love, for pair bonding, in a way that perhaps took that whole journey of complexity into a deeper sense of empathy and emotional complexity as part of Gaia's onward journey.
I just love that. It means so much. And I think it brings about a whole different look to how our beginnings could be, because I think a lot of times people like to narrow it down to this animalistic views. And while there's definitely some of that there,
Sure.
it still appears that, there's this beautiful consciousness love that's there as well.
Very much so. And I speak of the story of Gaia and therefore the story of our universe as a science of love, because, in my perspective, love is what connects, not just us, but love is the connective tissue. Love is and I don't mean sentimental love. I mean that deep, deep love that is that interbeingness of our entire universe. So to have Ardi, sort of our ancient ancestral lineage really taking that great step forward into that empathy, deeper empathy. And of course, it's certainly not human beings that embody empathy by any way. But it's just an interesting aspect of Gaia's own evolutionary impulse to embody that in our hominin ancestry and therefore into us.
Such a nice marker in our road.
It is. And, the other markers in the whole road is the story of Gaia is a story of collaboration. There's been sort of, healthy, if you like, competitive tensions, but always relationship. And every time there's been a move from simplicity to greater complexity in that story, it's been an embodiment of cooperation. So going back to what you were asking about us now and our choice now, for us to evolve, it is all about coming together to link up and lift up unity and diversity, unity and inclusion, unity and belonging in cooperation at all different levels.
Well, it seems that our planet doesn't look at its place in the universe as being separate. And it's interesting how humans look at ourselves as separate from our planet in many ways. It's such a great example, the way that you put this, just having that love there, that connection in the universe. I think it brings down the lesson for many people of how connected we truly are.
Absolutely. And this is a new and unitive narrative of love. And it seems to me, it brings into our lived experience, our understanding, and I hope our lived experience and embodiment, that we are microcosmic co-creators of a universe that meaningfully exists and purposefully evolves. And that's in us. The universe is flowing through us. Gaia is flowing through us. So I end the book, as you know, by inviting my readers to consider themselves as Gaians.
Well, and so with that, are there ways that we can help impact healing within not just our Earth, but within the universe?
It cannot be separate. When we heal ourselves, we're part of healing our planetary home. And when we heal our planetary home, we're inseparable, literally. But what we're doing is we're literally remembering that dismemberment to continue then that ongoing journey. And, at Whole World View that I co-founded a while ago, we talk about from this unitive perspective, to understand, experience, embody unitive awareness, to act local, feel global, and think cosmic, because they're completely interrelated.
I love that. It really gives us the bigger picture and how we're part of this beautiful dance that goes on.
Yes, and we are. We are an intrinsic, innate microcosm. Just as, we have 37 trillion cells in each of our bodies, we are cells of Gaia, and Gaia is a cell of our universe. All the way up, all the way down. We're part of its and our wholeness.
That's just so beautiful. Jude, you have so much great research in your book, The Story of Gaia. What do you want readers and our listeners to take away from your work?
I would invite readers to really live the power of love. To really live the power of love. And for me, that is, embodied and articulated in the Golden Rule. Treat others as you would wish to be treated, including our planetary home. And I think that sort of universality of the Golden Rule is because it actually realizes the inseparability of the whole of reality. Because when we treat others as we would wish to be treated, in a way, they're no longer others. They're us. We're all us. And so to live our lives in that way, to ask, what would love do? Every day, in small ways, big ways, whatever ways, is what I would really invite readers to come to a perception of by realizing the innate wholeness and therefore the inherent love that is all pervasive in our universe.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end this discussion on. My goodness, Jude, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Thank you, Marianne. Well, to go to www.wholeworld-view.org, that's WHOLE, world, WORLD -view, VIEW.org. Sign up to our newsletter. There's a lot of resources there, lots of YouTubes and other voices, many other voices. And really, everyone is very, very welcome to be part of that, our growing community.
Well, Jude, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jude Currivan. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Story of Gaia. The Story of Gaia is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And of course, remember to support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf there, ask for them to order it. You can also purchase the book at the publisher Inner Traditions at innertraditions.com. Well, we're going to pause here for a quick moment, and we'll be right back after this message. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.